Have you ever noticed that it's not always the glance, the hidden message, or the face-down phone that reveals the truth? That sometimes what truly exposes a man isn't in his gestures, but in the energy that sustains him. There's something the body senses before the mind understands, and it's in this silent space but the difference between a cheating man and a faithful man lives. Infidelity doesn't start in the bedroom, it begins in the invisible field of intention. It starts when he disconnects from his own truth, when the words, "I love you," become rehearsed, and the gaze that once offered shelter turns into a disguise. And it's curious, because there are men who cheat even while physically present, staying by your side, saying the right words, yet emotionally absent, wandering in other worlds. And there are men who, even from a distance, remain faithful, not because they're perfect, but because they've chosen to be whole, wherever they are. Carl Jung said that what is not brought to consciousness manifests as destiny. And this explains why so many relationships repeat themselves in pain, because as long as a man doesn't recognize himself, he becomes a prisoner of his own shadows. What he doesn't face within, he ends up projecting it onto the person beside him. That's why betrayal is, above all, an act of self-abandonment. No one harms another without first wounding their own soul. And on the other side, there's you, trying to understand what's missing, trying to decode the signs, trying to make love fit where presence no longer exists. And perhaps the most painful part is this, realizing he is there, but not really. That his touch doesn't warm, his gaze doesn't meet yours. His body is close, but his heart has long been gone. And when this absence starts to hurt, your instinct wants to understand, to save, to explain. But perhaps there's no logical explanation for what is emotionally unconscious. So this video is an invitation to look beyond the surface, to understand what truly differentiates a man who cheats from a faithful man. Not by appearances, but by consciousness. Let's dive together into this territory where love and truth intersect. Before we continue, take a deep breath and allow yourself to be present here. If this topic speaks to something inside you, like this video and subscribe to the channel. This way, this message reaches more women who are also trying to understand what their heart felt, but haven't yet found the words to express it.
The difference between these two men begins where most people don't look, in intention. The man who cheats lives in search of something to fill him, but he never truly finds it. He needs to be admired, desired, validated. His desire is not for love, but for recognition. He wants to prove, to himself and to the world, that he can still conquer, that he is still powerful, that he is still enough. The problem is that this search stems from a void he tries to silence with new experiences, but which always comes back to scream once the charm fades. The faithful man, on the other hand, doesn't need to prove anything. He isn't trying to be someone, he simply is. His security doesn't come from the attention he receives, but from the truth he sustains. He doesn't need an audience, he needs presence. When he loves, he builds, he doesn't scatter. He understands that real connection isn't made of fleeting passion, but of an encounter between two souls who choose each other every day, even when the initial sparkle is no longer the same. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." The unfaithful man looks outward, seeking in other women's eyes the confirmation of his own worth. The faithful man looks inward, seeking to grow alongside someone even when it requires vulnerability, dialogue, and truth. While the first flees from the mirror, the second has the courage to see himself and to rebuild. It's important to note, many men who cheat don't do it out of conscious malice. They do it because they haven't learned to love themselves yet. Infidelity, in many cases, is an unconscious attempt to fill an old wound, that of the boy who needed applause to feel seen, of the adolescent who confused desire with worth. It is the shadow manifesting, asking for healing. And here, woman, you need to understand something fundamental. It is not your responsibility to heal the wound of someone who refuses to face it. Love is not a remedy for anyone's emotional immaturity. If you have to shrink yourself to fit into a man's love, that love has already betrayed you, even if he hasn't yet betrayed you with his body. Notice this. The man who seeks validation makes you feel insecure, always on alert. You feel the need to prove yourself, compete, please. The man who seeks connection brings you calm. He makes you feel enough, not because he constantly compliments you, but because you sense in his silence that you can rest. The faithful man builds. The unfaithful man performs. The faithful man looks you in the eyes. The unfaithful man looks at his own reflection in your gaze. And in the end, the difference between them is simple yet profound. One wants to be loved, the other wants to be admired. And when you understand this, you begin to see that true love isn't about being intensely desired, but about being consciously chosen. Real love doesn't need a show, it needs presence.
The gaze reveals what words try to hide. There are looks that undress you, but don't truly see you. There are looks that desire you, but don't really notice you. The unfaithful man observes you with his body, not his soul. He seeks in your face the reflection of his own ego, not the presence of who you truly are. He wants to feel the thrill of conquest, not the depth of connection. His desire is fleeting, impatient, immediate. He wants you while you fuel the fire of admiration he needs to feel alive. The faithful man, however, has a different kind of gaze. He doesn't just observe you, he perceives you. He doesn't look at your body as a trophy, but as a temple where a soul resides. When he sees you, he is whole. Body, mind, and heart in the same place. He doesn't get distracted, he doesn't get lost in the diversions the world offers because he has learned to find beauty in constancy. His gaze doesn't search for what's missing, it recognizes what he has already found. Carl Jung said, "Presence is the deepest act of love," and that is what separates the faithful from the unfaithful. Presence. The unfaithful man is physically near, but emotionally distant. He may hold your hand, yet be elsewhere, desiring another, dreaming of another, being another version of himself. He is a body without presence, a heart afraid to remain. The faithful man understands that being is more than staying. He doesn't remain because it's convenient, but because he chooses to. The gaze of the unfaithful is fleeting, restless, inconsistent. The faithful's gaze is calm, serene, secure. While one gets lost in the illusion of novelty, the other finds freshness in depth. The unfaithful looks at what excites him. The faithful looks at what expands him. And it is in this difference that love matures. Desire may ignite passion, but only presence sustains the bond. How many times have you confused desire with love? How many times did you believe that the sparkle in his eyes meant devotion when in fact it was merely curiosity? You need to learn to feel the difference between being looked at and being seen. When he truly sees you, there is peace. When he only observes, there is tension. The faithful man looks at you as if to say in silence, "I am here." And that here is what heals. It restores your ground, your breath, your confidence. Because real love is not made of promises spoken in the heat of emotion, but of presences that repeat over time. There comes a moment when the body senses what the mind hasn't yet understood. That man who looks at you and reassures you is the same one who doesn't need games to keep you. He sees you because he has learned to see himself. He is whole because he allowed himself to be vulnerable. And perhaps this is what Jung meant when he said, "No one sees outside what they do not recognize within." The faithful man sees you because he has already looked within and faced his own shadows. The unfaithful flees from you, but mostly from himself. In the end, the gaze says it all. One desires you for what you awaken. The other loves you for who you are. A lie, before being an act against another, is a denial of oneself. The man who cheats first lies within his own heart. He builds a character that sustains the illusion of control, power, and freedom. He tells himself, "It's no big deal. I'm not really cheating. Everyone does it." But the price of self-deception is high. It empties the soul. Because when a man lies to himself, he fragments. He loses his center. He disconnects from his own essence. Carl Jung said, "What you deny dominates you." The unfaithful man is, in truth, a prisoner of his own denials. He lies because he cannot face the mirror of his own truth. He lies because he does not want to confront the fear of not being enough, the emptiness that consumes him, the void that no novelty can fill. He deceives not for pleasure, but to escape. Every new lie is a desperate attempt to avoid confronting his own shadow. The faithful man, on the other hand, chooses the harder path, the path of truth, not because he is perfect, but because he has learned not to fear what he feels. He knows that loving someone means removing the masks, allowing oneself to be seen in imperfection. The faithful understands that honesty is not the absence of mistakes. It is the presence of awareness. He acknowledges his vulnerabilities and therefore does not need to hide them. There is a quiet maturity in those who have learned to be true to themselves. The faithful man does not promise what he cannot deliver, nor does he feed illusions to be loved. He prefers to hurt you with the truth than destroy you with a lie, because he knows lies destroy connection, and truth, no matter how harsh, strengthens it. When the faithful man allows himself to be authentic, he connects with what Jung called the wholeness of being. He does not live in pieces, he lives in fullness. He does not need two lives, one public, one hidden, because he lives with coherence, and it is this coherence that makes him trustworthy. While the unfaithful tries to convince the world he is happy, the faithful seeks to understand what makes him whole. While the unfaithful uses others to fill inner gaps, the faithful builds bridges. He understands that fidelity is, above all, a commitment to one's own truth. And this is where a woman's gaze awakens, because the body senses when something is wrong. You feel when he lies, even if the words seem perfect. You sense when there is a disconnect between what he says and what he radiates. Feminine intuition is the radar of truth. It captures what reason is still trying to justify. Perhaps you've experienced this. That quiet unease, that doubt that doesn't arise from jealousy, but from misalignment. The body perceives before the mind, because the body does not lie. And when a man is true, you feel peace. When he isn't, you feel unrest. The faithful man doesn't need to prove anything. His presence is coherence in motion. He doesn't change tone, contradict himself, or hide. He is the same in gestures, words, and silences. And that is what gives you security. Fidelity, at its core, is a matter of consciousness. It reflects the degree of truth each person maintains with themselves. The man who lies to himself is doomed to live divided in inner conflict. The man who chooses truth lives in peace, even when life exposes him, because in love, as in the soul, there is freedom only when there is truth. The man who cheats lives in search of stimulation. He needs the excitement of the new to feel alive, because inside him there is a void that silence cannot fill. His mind is restless, his heart unstable. He confuses intensity with love and novelty with happiness. The unfaithful man feeds on beginnings, because beginnings do not force him to confront himself. At the start of something, everything is light, everything is illusion. He doesn't yet need to show the shadows he carries, nor face the demands of a true bond. Carl Jung said that human beings flee from depth because they fear confronting the unconscious, and that is exactly what the unfaithful man does. He avoids diving in because he knows that deep down he would encounter his own fear of not being loved. That's why he prefers constant movement, the game, the disguise. Each new woman is a different mirror, an attempt to rediscover the spark he lost within himself. But the reflection changes and the emptiness remains. The faithful man, on the other hand, understands that true love is not in the new, but in what renews. He finds beauty in repetition, in the small subtleties of everyday life. He finds wonder in constancy and depth in simple gestures. He knows that life together is not about fleeing boredom, but about transforming boredom into presence. The faithful man doesn't need multiple stories to feel alive. He dives deep into one and makes it a universe. He commits to the process of growing together, of rebuilding, of loving even when love seems quiet. For him, the true novelty is seeing the other person transform and still choosing them every day. While the unfaithful seeks the fire that consumes, the faithful cultivates the fire that warms. The first lives on explosions, The second, on constancy. And it is this constancy that calms the heart of the woman beside him, because the faithful man does not make you feel in competition. He makes you feel at peace. There is something profoundly spiritual in fidelity. The man who loves consciously understands that depth is the path to expansion. He dives into the layers of the bond, discovering the other as one would a sacred book. Every conversation, every silence, every reunion is an opportunity to see love in a new light. He knows that it is in meeting the same that the different is born, but the unfaithful cannot bear the mirror that intimacy offers. He fears true closeness because it reveals him. Escaping is easier than sustaining his own transparency. That is why he needs novelty, so he doesn't have to look at himself. The faithful man, on the other hand, allows himself to dive, and it is there that he finds himself. Fidelity makes him more whole, more conscious, more genuine. He understands that the soul is nourished not by what is new, but by what is real. A woman who has loved a man like this knows the difference. She knows there is something profoundly alive in the calm he transmits, because he does not seek the next body, the next glance, the next thrill. He seeks meaning, and it is in that meaning that he becomes rare, because while the world drifts across the surface, he chooses the dive. He prefers depth that transforms over novelty that distracts. He prefers love that matures over pleasure that repeats. The faithful man does not flee from silence. He inhabits it. And it is in that silence that love reveals itself in its purest form, not as euphoria, but as presence, not as addiction, but as choice, not as escape, but as encounter. And that is why he endures, because the faithful man understands that love, when true, does not need to be new. It only needs to be true enough to stay alive.
Before any word, before any action, the body senses. There is a silent wisdom within us that recognizes the truth before the mind comprehends it. With the faithful man, the body rests. With the unfaithful, the body contracts. It's a subtle difference, yet unmistakable. The faithful man makes you breathe deeply. The unfaithful makes you hold your breath. The faithful makes you trust. The unfaithful makes you watch. Carl Jung said that the unconscious manifests through the body, and that what does not reach consciousness manifests as destiny. When a woman lives in constant alertness, it's not love keeping her awake. It's fear. Fear of being replaced, of not being enough, of discovering what she already feels but isn't ready to name. A woman living with the unfaithful does not sleep peacefully. She falls asleep exhausted and wakes up tired, as if she needs to control even what she cannot. The body gives signs: a racing heart for no reason, insomnia, a lump in the throat, a mind that won't quiet, the feeling of always walking on tiptoe. All of this is the body saying, something is not in harmony. Because when love is true, it brings security, not confusion. Faithful love does not make you doubt yourself. It embraces you in a way the body understands. There is no fear, only rest. The faithful man gives you no reason to build defenses. He does not leave you uncertain about what he feels, nor does he make you compete for attention. He is predictable in the best sense. You know where he is, what he thinks, what he feels. And it is precisely in this predictability that peace resides, because healthy love is not made of highs and lows, but of emotional stability. The unfaithful, on the other hand, creates an atmosphere of distrust. He's the type who makes you check your phone, decode silences, interpret glances. The woman beside him lives trying to anticipate the pain. She becomes a guardian of something he has already let slip. And even without proof, something inside her knows. The body always knows. But there is something even deeper: energetic fidelity. A man can be physically present and yet absent in soul. His body may be there, but his energy left long ago. And it is this absence that the woman's body senses. That is why she feels alone even when accompanied, empty even when embraced. The body recognizes when love is no longer present and begins to demand liberation. With the faithful,
the body learns to trust again. It learns it no longer needs to defend itself, that it can relax without fear of being betrayed by the unexpected. There is a serenity that comes from this constant presence, this healing predictability. The faithful man is the one who calms the nervous system of the woman who loves him. He doesn't awaken anxiety. He awakens surrender. And it is in this difference that everything is revealed. The unfaithful makes you disconnect from yourself because he forces you to live in your mind, trying to understand what went wrong. The faithful reconnects you to your essence because he allows you to feel, to exist, to be without fear of losing. At its core, the body is the first mirror of love. It records everything the mind tries to hide. That is why the most powerful technique is not to investigate, but to perceive. The body signals before the mind, and almost always it is right. When something is true, the body rests. When something is false, it screams. And the woman who learns to listen to her own body is never deceived again, because the body is the direct channel to the soul, and the soul never confuses itself. That is why before trying to understand another, it is essential to feel yourself, because the body, in its ancient wisdom, always reveals what the heart has not yet dared to admit. And in the end, it is the body that guides you back to the place where love is calm, conscious, and faithful. The most powerful technique is simple. Observe how you feel when you are near him. The body always recognizes the truth that the mind tries to deny. You might try to justify his behavior. You might convince yourself that you're overreacting, that it's just a phase, that he will change. But the body does not lie. It senses what words try to hide. It notices when there is presence, and when absence is disguised as affection. You know that knot in your stomach when he arrives, or the quiet relief when he leaves? This is not drama. It is biological wisdom. The body knows when love is a refuge and when it is a threat. It knows when it is truly being seen and when it is only serving as a mirror for someone else's ego. Carl Jung said that everything we deny in ourselves returns disguised as destiny. And perhaps that is it. The body tries to warn us, but the mind, afraid of losing, creates stories so it doesn't have to listen. Then the pain grows, the chest tightens, the soul falls silent, and you go on, thinking you are being strong, when in reality, you are just numbing yourself. But real strength is born when you listen to yourself, when you stop doubting what you feel, when you allow your body to tell you the truth that your mind didn't have the courage to admit, because it is there. In that moment of silent clarity, that liberation begins. The faithful man brings you peace. The unfaithful man drains your energy, and your body is the first to notice this difference. Observe, feel, listen, because the body is the compass that always points to true love and away from everything that hurts. So if there is a technique, it's not about deciphering the other person. It's about deciphering yourself. It's about learning to trust your own reading of love again. The body never makes mistakes. It just waits for you to start listening to it again. And if this video has brought you clarity, if at any moment you felt seen, embraced, or finally understood something your heart has known for a long time, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with a woman who also needs to remember that her body is a silent oracle. And write in the comments, my body knows the truth, because when you start listening to your body, no false love survives, and the true one finally finds space to stay.